Hey everyone, this is the Innovator's Mindset with Erica Bare and Tiffany Burns. There we go. Here we go. All right. I am connecting with Erica and Tiffany. They have a book out called Connecting Through Conversation, a playbook for talking with students, which they actually said was too long of a title, but I actually think it's perfect. It's a great title. So it is a really great conversation. We'll talk about the book. You can also see more about their book, membership. There's an online course that you have access to. So you'll see all those links down below in the podcast. So first of all, Erica and Tiffany, thanks for being on the podcast. Appreciate you being here and taking time out of your day.
Oh, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I love listening, so it's fun to be on the other side.
Erica is the one. Tiffany doesn't listen, so I'm going to talk to you the whole time, Erica. Tiffany is like, "Who is this now?
Perfect.
Why would you make us do this?" No, I'm teasing. So it is great to have you on. I know Erica said there's a cat situation going on right now. What's going on?
So I made a really interesting decision to adopt two cats yesterday. So they're kind of in the background causing a lot of havoc, and I'm hopeful that they're far enough away to not be too much of a distraction for y'all today, but they're pretty
See,
sweet.
and the reason is like I asked that question just in case or something, so we just own it right at the beginning,
Perfect.
right? So hey,
Yep.
Tiffany, we'll start with you. If you can just tell a little bit about yourself, what you do today, and we'll get into the book, but just tell some of your experience and some of the work that you're doing, and then we'll lean it or turn it over back to Erica.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in education for over 20 years. I've taught elementary, middle, high school, university. I've been an administrator for this would be year 13. But I'm on a professional sabbatical this year. Eric and I wrote our book a couple years ago, and we've been traveling all over the country. And it turns out it's kind of hard to be a school principal remotely. So this year I took a sabbatical, and then I've also been teaching full time at our university here in Southern Oregon, working with pre-service teachers, and I'm just having a really good year.
I love it. And Erica, you're currently a superintendent, is that correct?
That's right. I'm a superintendent in Southern Oregon, and I started my career also 20 years plus ago. I was a special educator when I first got started, and that's still very much where my heart and mission comes when I show up to work every day. And I've done all kinds of other fabulous jobs. I've been, high school assistant principal and principal, elementary principal, director of student services. I've done all kinds of fun things, and I've taught students K through 21. So I've had a very fun and exciting career up to this point, and it just keeps getting better.
I love it. And you're the interesting thing about your title is connecting through conversation. You two, let's talk about how did you two connect? Like how did you actually connect? Not just to write the book, but actually obviously prior to this as well.
Yeah, so Tiffany's my work bestie, and that really started when we went to administrator school here in Southern Oregon. We both went to Southern Oregon University, and we're going through the program together and just really connected over a shared set of values and how much we loved working with kids. And we were kind of like, oh, someday, we'll find a way to keep working together. Maybe we'll even write together. And then we got really lucky in that we both ended up getting our first job as administrators in the
Hmm.
same district. And we were the only two newbies. So we kind of became each other's little support
Right.
network. We would get together and try and figure out what the heck we were doing in this new world, and really connected there and have stayed connected ever since.
Yeah. And so when you came up with the concept of this book, I'm sure like is kind of a slow process, right? I don't think you like wrote the book immediately. So why write this book? Like what was the purpose? What is the hope that it will actually achieve in this idea of connecting through conversation, which is probably I think we are losing a little bit of that art of conversation in our world today, right now. I think, even having a podcast, one of the things that I think has really helped me, and it's not really being exemplified in this moment right now, is I love what a podcast is. You learn to listen, right? And I think that's and let others speak. So talk a little bit about and I'll turn it over to Tiffany. Talk a little bit about how you two came together on why you wanted to write this book.
Well, so Eric and I always knew we really loved writing together. And we, like she said, we had these shared values. So we always knew we'd write a book together, or we thought we would. We just weren't sure what it would be about. And then after we came back from the COVID pandemic, it was really a challenging time. And we were dealing with new behaviors with students and helping figure out how to support new staff on how to help support students. And things were pretty tricky. And so I had this staff meeting, and it was all on Zoom because our kids were allowed to be back, but the staff weren't allowed to gather yet for fear of school closing down if somebody got sick. And so it was a wild time. And so one of our staff members asked me at the beginning of the day, she said, "Hey, Tiffany, some of our staff are having some difficulties connecting with kids and figuring out how to navigate these challenging behaviors. Do you think you could share kind of some of your tips and tricks for that? You know, like eye contact and don't ask a question if it's not a choice, those kind of things." And I was like, I mean, I could put that together for this afternoon. And I'm a teacher, so I really pride myself on giving professional development that allows time for processing and that is really, using best practices. And this was not that. This was me like listing off a number of strategies to use. And I look up on my Zoom screen and everyone is like writing down every single thing that I'm saying. So after I reached out to Erica and I was like, I found the book that we need.
And I was the assistant superintendent that time. And so I was in service to my building principals. I'm like, oh, she wants me to order this book for her staff. So I go on to Google and I'm typing in how to talk with kids. And I text her and I'm like, who's the author? I can't find it. And she like sends back a gazillion laughing emojis. And she's like, no, we are. And so that really was the way it started. And it's been a really fun and exciting journey ever since.
I love that. And this is that, we don't talk about the pandemic. There's a pandemic.
Oh, we don't? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
I'm teasing you. This is something that I think a lot of people are struggling with right now it's 2025 and there's still obviously remnants with behavior stuff that's happening in schools and just having conversations. So if you were to take, like, for example, like you mentioned something, Tiffany, the don't ask a question unless, tell me more about that one. What did you mean by that?
Well, so what we see all the time is that when adults are talking with students, especially educators, like we're so polite, we're so respectful, we so want to just, get kids on our side. And so often when we ask a question when it's actually a directive, like we'll say things like, could you please clean this up before you head out to lunch? Or could you please take a seat? Or would you like to help me with this? And when we ask questions like that, students could very easily say, no, I don't want to help you clean that up. I'm really not interested in walking in the hallway. And so when we phrase things in questions that aren't questions, it's confusing to kids. So we really just talk about, if it's not a question, don't ask it. Just state it in the, state the expectation. And we talk a lot. You said you have a 2-year-old, right? So if you were to say to your 2-year-old, you feel like going to bed?
Yeah.
So it's really shifting it and saying, hey, it's time for bed now. And then so many times we hear folks state an expectation and then put the word okay at the end. So they turn their statement into a question like, let's walk in the hall, okay? Well, no, we walk in the hall. Thank you for taking a seat, and just being really clear about that. And it's a minor shift and it makes an enormous difference for our students and our 2-year-olds.
Yeah. This is like, it's funny because I'm pretty old school parent. Like there's not many questions. I'm just saying that I remember actually, I know, and I remember seeing this. I'm a huge basketball fan. I saw about Shaq's dad and, Shaquille O'Neal, and he was really hard on Shaq, and Shaq, ended up being like, one of the best NBA players of all time. Now he also is like 7'2" and, pretty big guy, pretty agile, but there is an expectation like, hey, this is not a question. This is an expectation. And this is how things get done. And I remember him saying, you might not like the way I'm doing it, but you'll love the results. And I think that to me is like a lot of times we it's like of course we want students to like gradually have more voice and choice, but they also like there's a reason why we're the adults too. And I don't know, maybe that's like I'm old school thinking that. So I don't know, Erica, what are your thoughts? Am I losing my
No,
mind
I think
here? What's going on? Yeah.
you're 100% right on. And the thing is, children need boundaries. They need to
Yeah.
know what the expectations are so that they can stay within those. And it's their jobs to test that a little bit and to see how far they can go. And so we spend a lot of time talking about all of the strategies to avoid those power struggles. And that's just really them trying to figure out, where does my control start and where doesn't it? So we really believe in being clear with expectations. And then the other piece that we offer is that if there is an opportunity to offer a choice,
Yeah.
two things, two choices that you can live with, that's your opportunity to give them an option for control, again, with two things that you can live with. So we need to make sure that this assignment gets done today. Do you want to finish it now, or do you want to finish it at lunch? Giving two options that we can live with, being very clear with the expectation. But we don't want to confuse kids by being muddy with our boundary.
Right. Well, it's okay. So I'm sure parents listening to this too, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. So now I'm gonna ask for some parenting advice. So
Okay.
my oldest is 8 years old, and she's getting a little bit. Can do a little snarkiness sometimes, and she'll do something. And I'll just say, "Try again," and then it is corrected. But now I'm like a little frustrated. I'm like, I have to say, "Try again," because I've never had to say that before. So it is like, and she knows it's the reason I thought of this, Erica, is because you're like, her job is to test the boundaries. And that's the boundary being, I was like, that's like, she just did that the other day. And I'm like, and I was
Yep.
like, now I have to say, like, I have to follow up now. Like,
Yep.
just listen.
Yep.
She used to just listen. And now I have to like correct it too. So like, is that where is that in the spectrum of, is that like, am I doing it wrong? What would you suggest? Is there anything I'd be doing? What would you say?
Totally typical development. Again, it is our kids' job to figure out, can I do this? And by you responding with nope, and you're going to try again and practice, we love a love and logic tip for
Yep.
this one. Tiffany, do you want to talk about I'll talk to you when your voice sounds like mine?
Yeah, well, and that's when kids get like they're whiny or they yell or whatever, and they're talking in a tone that isn't going to work, And so what we'd say is just respond back with, "I'll talk to you when your voice sounds like mine," and that comes right out of Love and Logic. It does two things. First, it models the behavior for the child that you're expecting. But second, you can't yell that, right? Like you'd
Right.
sound ridiculous if you
Be
kind of
quiet.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, the other one that we talk a lot about too is like you said, the whole thing of like try again, right? Like you were like, "Well, that's not going to work, try again." So the piece too that we see is that kids, they might keep pushing that boundary and pushing that boundary. And so as the adult, we have to hold firm.
Mhm.
If we say, "I'll talk to you when your voice sounds like mine," or, "Oh, no, sorry, that's not a choice, try again." And then they do try again, or they do talk to us in this certain way, we have to be the broken record. We
Mhm.
have to keep saying, "Nope, here's the boundary, here's the expectation, and this is what I'm going to do." Because the reality is, if they try 7 times and we hold strong all 7 times, but then we give in on time 8,
Mhm.
all we have taught them is, "You just have to wear me down. Like,
Mhm.
just wear me down, get me tired, and then I'll give in." And so it's really about
Yep.
holding strong and maintaining that boundary.
Yeah, and like I think about all of this in, I will say I think about all this as a parent, and when you're having these conversations, I've like some people think I'm pretty strict with my kids, but I know teachers appreciate it. They might not like how it looks at first, but then if my kid's in your class, you appreciate it quite a bit, right? And I think there's like something that is, hey, there is an expectation. I don't mind you. Here's the thing with me. I don't mind you kind of testing the boundaries with me, as my child. This will not go over well if you do this with a teacher. And that's like, I grew up in a time where, it was very different in school when there was a phone call home, right? Like you're going to get it in 2 places, not maybe one. So that was
Oh, yeah,
something.
us too.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So
Yep.
it's very different. And
Different
I
time.
grew up with parents that came from Greece, and it was very different parenting style that they grew up in. So, but I think those boundaries are really important. One of the questions I have is, so I understand obviously this is written from, the perspective of, administrators, teachers, working with students. How would you take this applying with adults? I'm curious if there's like crossover in having some of those, tough conversations. Cause like, I think that, there's sometimes, as administrators, teachers, colleagues, I've had some tough conversations, with, my colleagues in different roles. Any thoughts on that? Any tips that you share in your work?
Yeah, so there's a ton of crossover. And it's so funny that you bring that up because really we've been, going all over talking about this in different places and we're getting a great response. And there's always an administrator in the room who will come up after and say, "This was so great. I want all my staff to have it. But what about the grown-ups? How do I have these conversations with the other
Uh-huh.
educators that I'm supporting, right?" And so we started sharing that work as well. And the what we're finding, the similarities are you have to start with care. You have to start in that place of care. You have to listen well. You have to treat everyone with dignity. And you have to make sure that you're building trust so that when you're going to that person, they're going to listen to you.
Mhm.
And then there's a whole slew of strategies that we use to be really clear, very direct. Similar with kids, we need to be very clear in our expectation. It's not fair to hold an educator to an expectation if we're not clear about it. It's not fair to have a concern about their performance and not be really direct about the concern so they have an opportunity to turn that around. And there just isn't that much difference between how we do that with kids for behavior and
Right.
then how we do with educators to help them get better. And so, yeah, we've had a lot of fun exploring that work. And in my role now, I have a lot more opportunity to practice
Right.
that than I do talking with kids. So it's super fun.
Well, and that's the next book, like
Yeah,
also. So
yeah,
we've been
yeah.
doing a number of workshops on that, like navigating conflict with adults. And our whole thing is like we wrote our book for really busy people, for busy educators. So our style is that it's super practical. Like you can pick it up and go, this is something that I learned today that I'm going to implement tomorrow. Or if you have kids at home, that I'm going to use on my children in an hour. So
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say, like, you need to build trusting relationships. People know that. What we say is you need to do step one, step two, step three. Here's how you do it
Mhm.
so that folks can then go immediately apply.
So, like when you're talking about this, there's one. It's actually funny because I'm very good friends with this gentleman. He's a colleague of mine. We were both teaching high school at the time. He was coaching volleyball, I was coaching basketball, and he was the athletic director. And they had won. They had surprisingly won and ended up going further in the playoffs. So because the seasons overlapped, volleyball is ending, basketball starting. He bought my time, and it was like, hey, volleyball gets precedent until the season's done because you're just starting the season where we're in playoffs. So I was upset about it because I was like, geez, now I got to change everything I'm doing, like because now. And I remember complaining about him in the staff room. He wasn't there, and I was like, I can't believe he did this, blah blah blah. And so he came up to me. He said, I heard you complaining about me in the staff room. I'm like, I was. And he said, listen, if you have a problem with me, come talk to me. I'm like, you're right. I'm sorry. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
And it was it. That was it. Like, we're good friends. Like, I remember that. Whereas I've also seen silent treatment among staff. I've seen, passive aggressive stuff.
Yeah.
And I always think about that. And like, I'm outing myself. Like, I was the one who did something wrong here. And I appreciated that he wasn't like, doing stuff. Like, it was conversation. He said what he said. I apologize. That was it. It was over, right? And I was like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have done that. I should have came right to you, and we could have got it solved. And that to me really, when I was an administrator, I talk very, like if there's an issue, I said it. I said it very bluntly. I'm like, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity because I don't want this to kind of get worse because we didn't address something small in the beginning. So that's what I thought of right away. It was
Well,
me screwing up. Yeah.
well, in that clear, direct conversation, I bet you didn't do that again. I
exactly.
bet the next time
No.
you had a concern, you went directly to the person. And that's all we want. We want
Yep.
to improve the behavior. It's the same thing. You know, I don't like talking about grown-ups like they're kids, but with kids, when they're not doing something properly, they don't have the skill set, they don't have the skills. We need to teach them.
Mhm.
If we have a staff member not meeting the expectation, we need to restate the expectation and make sure that they have the supports and scaffolds to get there. So in this case, real quick and direct conversation, and you had it, and it wasn't a mistake that was going to happen again. And that's all we want.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. It's like, don't he wasn't, and it's like he modeled what he expected. He could have easily
Right.
talked trash about me behind
Yep.
someone else, right? So,
Yep.
and I was like, yeah, you're right. That was my
Mhm.
bad, right? So I'd rather call myself out because I could share some of those
Yeah.
instances where I wasn't the person making
Yep.
mistakes.
Yep. Yep.
Right? And, it's better when you out yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last question I'll ask you. I know that a lot of people would love for you to come in, dig deeper into this, but they don't necessarily have that opportunity. I know you have. There's like it says a membership, and you can see it on the website, and we'll link it there too. There is an online opportunity. Can you just tell a little bit about what that looks like, and how people can have access to it, or like if they were to sign up for it, what would that process look like?
Yeah, so it's a phenomenal opportunity for that like turnkey PD. If you really want your teachers to have this information, your support staff to have this information, but you don't have that time to either bring us in or the time
Mhm.
is broken into chunks, it allows you to do it in a really self-paced, easy way. It's accessible. We really wanted it to be accessible for every educator from, your bus driver to your administrator. So you watch it in 5-10 minute chunks, and then there's a reflection guide that goes alongside that as a building leader you could use to guide through. So you could have discussions in between, or as an individual, you could use that for reflection. So it's designed to be turnkey, easy PD that you either do for yourself, or if you're wanting your whole staff to have the same language and the same toolkit, then you can also do that for everyone.
Okay, so I know I said last question. I got one more for you. This is maybe the controversial one. And we'll start with you, Tiffany. What you think of this? One of my things that I'm seeing in the world right now is we're asking a lot of stuff about this when dealing with kids, and we kind of talked about the adults. I actually think one of the big issues in our world today is we're not having conversations where we're listening to each other. We're understanding different perspectives. Like it's like, hey, we have empathy unless you disagree with me, then I don't have any. And it's like, it's not really empathy, right? So, like, how do you see this? I don't know if this is totally off. One of the things that I remember growing up, we kind of mentioned growing up in a similar time frame. I believe I'm older than both of you, but we were taught, I was taught, don't talk politics and religion with strangers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how I've always kind of embraced it. But I saw something that was challenging to me. It said, we should have never been taught, don't talk politics and religion with strangers. We should have been taught, how do we talk about those things in a civil manner? Is there any like overlap here? Like, is that, in how we have conversations that are tough where we don't agree with people? Is there some of that too? Because I think this is it. I think one of my concerns about a lot of the world is people talk to each other on the other side of the screen. They don't see emotion, they don't see connection, and we lost that. I always kind of take the belief system that I don't know what's going on the other side of a screen, so I always try to talk with respect to someone that the worst day could be happening to them, and I just don't want to pile on to it. So I don't know if there's any connection with that. If there isn't, I'll just cut this part out. But
No, I love that you asked that. Thank you so much for asking that, because I 100% agree that there is carryover with that. And yeah, we should have been taught how to talk about religion, and we should have been taught how to talk about politics. As educators, we teach kids how to read, how to write, how to problem solve, how to be critical thinkers. And a huge part of what we're also teaching them is how to share space and how to have conversation and how to disagree respectfully and just how to communicate. And so as educators, we have, to quote Spider-Man, I'm sorry, but we have an incredible power. And with that great power comes great responsibility. And so as the educators, as the adults in the space, it's our, I'm going to say, obligation to talk with students in a way that models for them the way in which we want to be treated, right? And so we say that you get to set the weather, you set the tone. So by setting the weather, by setting the tone, you get to determine the culture. And Eric and I are on a mission. We want every single student in every single school to feel valued, cared for, loved, and really seen and included, and feel this deep sense of belonging. Like we want to build this culture of connection, and we have a real opportunity to model for them things that we are not seeing on a national stage.
Erica, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the piece that I would add is we talk a lot about the idea of perspective getting instead of perspective taking. I think it's so easy for us to be like, well, from this perspective or that perspective, and then make some
Yeah.
assumptions or guesses about what that is. And instead, we want to really lead with curiosity and ask questions and really come to understand what is the unique perspective from this person who has a different background
Right.
than me, who has a different experience than me, who maybe spilled coffee on themselves as they were driving to work, whatever it is. Like
Right.
we want to ask the questions instead of assuming, and really avoid making judgments. I think it's Ted Lasso who's like,
Right.
be curious, not judgmental. And I think we really want to think about, there are hugely diverse perspectives in the world. And right now, it feels like having a different perspective than someone else somehow means that you can't be connected.
Right.
And that really limits what we can do as a classroom, as a school, as a society, right? We have to be able to come together with our different perspectives and celebrate differences and make sure that we have the ability to share space and learn from each other and expand our own perspectives.
I love that. I think that that's so important. And you see a lot of conversations. There's a lot of conversations about kids with technology, social media. It's not good. I'm like, have you seen the adults? Have you seen have you seen them? Because they're not knocking out of the park right now. And I think they're watching all the time. And I think that is a really important thing, is like how we talk to each other, how we model stuff. We're not here to like own each other on the internet, right? Like I think that's something that really matters to me. I'll end with this last thing, and it kind of bridges on something Tiffany said. I talked about I'm very strict with my own kids, and my oldest, because she understands this in a different way than my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old understand. I'll say, why am I strict with you? And she said, because dad wants me to have a good life. And I said, absolutely. And so she knows I care about her, and she knows I'm doing it because she is valued, because I do care about her. And I know eventually I won't be there. And so I want to make sure I set her up. And I think a lot of times people see this is because we're being mean as opposed to we're being loving, right? And I think that is so important. So I really appreciate this, because I think these are conversations that obviously need to happen, and there's a way that they can happen to be really effective to help students not only improve behavior but have a good life. I think that's the ultimate. So thanks for being on the podcast, everyone listening. If you can check out connectingthroughconversation.com, you'll see access to the book, access to the course. But also make sure you connect with Erica and Tiffany, absolutely amazing people. I'm really honored. I know you wrote this book with my good friend Jimmy Cassis, very influential in my life, and I hope I've done something good for him too. So make sure you say hi the next time you see him, because he's someone I really look up to. But thanks for being on the podcast, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.